All right. Hello, everyone. So today's MCAT question of the day slash DAT question is amazing because I know the MCAT and DAT. I don't actually, this is not a case in the DAT, but the MCAT usually has passages and then they ask questions about the passage. Because these videos have to be a certain time and I can't force everyone to read a passage, most of my questions thus far have been relatively application based. Today, I also have an application-based question, but this one is much more passage-like. So it has some background knowledge, and then it asks you to apply that background knowledge to an actual question. So I'm hoping this will be a bit more helpful, and it's related to neurology. So with that, let's get started. It's also based on a paper, as you'll see. It says, recent studies reveal several groups of neurons that become activated upon anticipation or consumption of meals. Some of these neurons are partially receptive to the hormone oxytocin. These are referred to as OXTR neurons. And upon stimulation of these neurons, they lead to a decreased consumption of food. Other neurons are receptive to a neuropeptide called agouti-related protein, AgRP neurons. They're called AgRP neurons. And upon stimulation, these neurons will promote robust feeding. What would happen to the stimulation frequency of these neurons in a person who has been fasting for 24 hours? So I tried to simplify this as much as I could. The neuron on your right, the right screen, right hand side of the screen, is the OXTR neuron, and the lower left is the AGPR neuron. And I want to know what happens. So let's say someone has been fasting and they haven't eaten for 24 hours. What would happen to the stimulation frequency of the AGPR neuron compared to the OXTR neuron? So with that, let's get into how to approach this question. Let's talk first about the OXTR neurons. These ones are receptive to oxytocin. So the first step that's going to happen is oxytocin comes in and binds to the neuron. And when it binds to the neuron actually releases an output and it causes a physiological change. And specifically in this case, it causes a decrease in food intake, right? That's written in the question. It's saying that oxytocin related neurons, when they are stimulated, they lead to a decreased consumption of food. So I told you they decrease food intake. So now if you really want to understand this, when do you want to promote this aspect of like decreasing food intake? When do you want to decrease your food intake? Like if you were to think about when these neurons would want to be active, believe it or not, you'd want to decrease your food intake when you're full, right? Like let's say you just ate a big meal and you literally feel so stuffed. That's when these neurons would be active, right? Because that's when these neurons would be like, okay, buddy, you've eaten so much, you should probably stop eating now because you are full, right? So when do you want to promote these neurons? You want to promote these neurons when you're full, right? And so, believe it or not, let me go over this one more time. The input for these OXTR neurons, so these are OXTR neurons. The input for these OXTR neurons is that you are obviously getting oxytocin, but it's also the fact that you're full. Let's say you're full. And the output is that you're eventually going to say, okay, I'm full and I no longer want to eat anymore. So so now let's apply this to our question. Our question says, what would happen to these OXTR neurons, assuming that you have been fasting, right? You have been fasting for 24 hours. If you've been fasting for 24 hours, are you full? No, you're probably not full. If anything, you're very, very hungry. So this whole process of promoting satiation is likely less likely to occur because you literally are not full at all, right? Your body is hungry. So you don't want to promote satiation. You actually want to decrease this. You want to decrease this feeling of satiation because you're so hungry at this point. You've been fasting for 24 hours. So believe it or not, the OXTR neurons will decrease their firing rate as someone gets more hungry because they're hungry. They're not satiated. They're not full. So they actually need to eat food, right? These neurons would start firing more as you eat more and more food, and they'd say, okay, you've eaten enough, no more anymore. But in this case, if you've been fasting for 24 hours, these neurons will likely not be firing that much because they're not going to want to tell you that you're full. You're very hungry. So now let's apply the same thing to the AGRP neurons, right? So these ones, if you look at the lower left-hand corner, they're receptive to AgRP. The AgRP comes in, binds to the neuron, and at the end, the neuron has an output signal, and it tells you, in your brain, it tells you that you are hungry. So this one promotes feeding, right? So the AgRP binds, And the AgRP is like, man, I'm so hungry, and you're like, oh my god, this neuron has been stimulated, and this neuron will now promote feeding. So now, let me ask you a question. When do you want to promote feeding? Let's say you were this neuron. When would you want to be activated? Believe it or not, you want to be activated when you're hungry, right? Like, let's say you've been starving for ages, then there's going to be a ton of AgRP that's going to bind, and when it binds, it's going to want you to eat so bad that you're going to eat your heart out, and that's when these neurons will be activated, right? So let's do another review. So the input for the AgRP neurons is obviously AgRP. The AgRP comes along and it binds, and the output is that it promotes feeding. So the more hungry you are, the more active these neurons are going to be. So now, let's say that you are fasting for 24 hours. Sorry, that was my phone. I'm going to ignore it. But let's say you've been fasting for 24 hours. What's going to happen to these AgRP neurons? Well, if you've been fasting for 24 hours, you are going to be really hungry, right? And you're going to really, really want to eat. And what's going to happen is that these neurons will increase their firing rate. They're going to increase their firing rate because you're so hungry that your body is telling you you need to eat, buddy. And it's going to try to amplify this signal and tell you you need to eat, right? So that's that. So the AgRP neurons will increase their firing rate as someone gets more hungry, and the oxytocin neurons will decrease their firing rate as someone gets more hungry. And if you've been fasting for 24 hours, you are going to be hungry. You're going to be super hungry. And if you're hungry, believe it or not, you are going to have an increase in AgRP neurons stimulation, and you're going to have a decrease in oxytocin neuron stimulation because those two do two different things, right? So the answer here is the answer choice that matches my prediction, and that answer choice is answer choice A. AgRP neurons fire more frequently and OXTR neurons fire less frequently. I will attach the paper I got this question from in the description. If you have any questions for me, please let me know. As always, subscribe, like, share, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. All right, see ya. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Really appreciate it. You want to check out any of my other videos, there's going to be one right here. Another link to one of my videos right here. And another video right here. Why not? I'll put one video right over here. And last but not least, if you want to subscribe to this channel, really appreciate it because I'm still an early YouTuber trying to get it down. But a subscription button should be right over here. So please subscribe. Cool. Thanks. See you guys in the next one. Hope you find these videos helpful.